Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Florida. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, back from Talladega, Alabama, where Candy and Ebling and I had an opportunity to cover the NASCAR race out there, won by Chase Elliott. What an incredible weekend. We want to thank Russell Branham for hosting us there. Also had an opportunity to do our show with Mark Mancini over at the Talladega Super Speedway with Keith Thorney. That was a great experience. Enjoyed our conversation with Keith. And again, hats off to Russell Branham who entertained us. We got a lot accomplished in a very short couple of days up there. I'm looking forward to go back to Talladega during the spring. With that said, our Fire Up Florida crew consists of Greg Fuchs. Welcome back, Greg.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
And Avi Greenwald.
How you doing, guys?
Doing all right. And Mr. Mark Mancini with his finger action. I don't know what he's trying to signal me or whatever it is, but whatever it is.
The props of the show that's sweeping the country, the most must-see, must-hear show on Mondays.
Yeah, you know that for sure, Mark. So let me give you an overview of the show, folks. Fire Up Florida, football, and some more football. That's what we're going to roll with tonight. With that said, we center a lot of these shows around Greg Fuchs' articles. So, Greg, take it away.
Yeah, let's start with the Dolphins. They played last Thursday, which seems like it's been more than seems like it's been 2 weeks ago since they played that game. Lost the first game of the season, 27-15 to the Bengals. The stats for that game were very even, but just like the week before when the Bills made a bunch of mistakes that cost them the game against the Dolphins made several big mistakes in the game against the Bengals that cost them the game. Very first drive of the game, Chase Edmonds dropped the pass in the end zone. They had to settle for a field goal, so that was 4 points right there. One of their other drives, Tyreek Hill was streaming down the middle of the field, wide open, and Tua underthrew him. Would have been a touchdown. Instead, the ball was intercepted. Another big mistake when they were losing 7-6 at the time, and Jason Sanders lined up for a 52-yard field goal. Kick got blocked. Gave Cincinnati excellent field position. Before you knew it, they scored a touchdown. So instead of the Fins being up 9-7, they were down 14-6. And then towards the end of the fourth quarter, with Bridgewater in the game, he was marching them downfield. Looks like despite those mistakes, the Dolphins were going to come back like they did against the Bills and the Ravens and pull this game out. And then Bridgewater throws an interception at the 9-yard line, which Cincinnati ran all the way back to the Miami 45. They scored one more touchdown, and that was the ball game. Couple things that concern me about the Dolphins. Man, I'm nitpicking here because they're 3-1. And after the opening 4 games they had, I'm amazed they're 4-1 because, Patriots, Ravens, Bills, and Bengals was quite the gauntlet to go through. Other than that fourth quarter against the Ravens, the Dolphins' offense is leaving a lot to be desired. All right. Biggest problem, they just can't run the ball. And that's supposed to be McDaniel's strength as a coach. They're only averaging 69 yards a game. That needs to improve. Tough to do the play action when you can't run the ball. The other thing that concerns me about the Dolphins is one thing about their defense. I always thought the Dolphins defense would bend a lot but not break. And they would get the real value of that defense. They'd get a lot of sacks and a lot of turnovers. And that has not been happening this year. They only got 1 sack against Burrow, who had been sacked, I think, 15 times in the first 3 games. They only have 7 sacks for the entire year. And they have not had a lot of turnovers this year. That needs to change. Defense needs to get better. Offense needs to get better. You can't just throw everything on the shoulders of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So that's the game. The big story out of this, which is still probably the number one story in the NFL, is Tua getting injured. All right. Everyone remembers the Buffalo game when it was the roughing the passer and his head smacked against the ground. He got up, wobbled, basically fell to his knees. Everyone thought, as you were watching it, he's got a concussion. He's done for the game. But who's out there starting the second half? It's Tua. They said it was a back injury. And I can understand. I mean, I've had my own back injured, and I've had times where I wobbled and fell to the ground. But I certainly know I couldn't have played football 15 minutes later. So the whole back injury smells a little funny, but he supposedly passed all the NFL protocols. And then going into Thursday's game, everyone's playing, I think, 20/20 hindsight on this because of the injury that happened to get against the Bengals. But he got tested every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for the concussion, passed everything with flying colors, supposedly. NFL is obviously investigating what was actually done. What were the results of all these tests? We don't really know yet. No one's told us that. And then, he got sacked. The only time he gets sacked in the game. And he got twisted and his head hit the ground. And it was real creepy when you saw his fingers sort of going like this. And I'm going, what the heck is that? That can't be good. So, they took him to the hospital, neck and head injuries, concussion. But he was okay to go on the plane that night, which I think is a little odd because you got the pressure when you fly on the brain. So I thought that was odd, just to stick him in a car and, drive him home. So the whole football world is, I think, overreacting to a degree because we're not doctors. We don't know the entire story yet. We don't know what the medical findings were. So we'll see how that investigation turns out. Tua has been ruled out for this week. I expect him to miss next week too. I think to give him at least 2 weeks to recover. So that is the huge story in the NFL, and I know you guys are going to talk about that and give us your thoughts in a little bit. But we'll talk about a couple of other NFL games still involving Florida teams. The Jaguars, who were coming off 2 incredibly impressive wins against the Colts and the Chargers, went up to Philadelphia, and it wasn't surprising they lost. But the big killer there was Trevor Lawrence turned the ball over 5 times, 1 interception, 4 fumbles. And it's tough enough to beat the Eagles with no turnovers. We turned the ball over 5 times. And, the Jacksonville came out strong. I think they're up 14-0. And then things turned the other way. So Jacksonville's now 2-2. I think they play Houston this week. So they could easily be 3-2. And the other game might have been maybe the most exciting game of the week. It was last night, the Sunday night game, Chiefs and Bucs. Everyone thought this might be a defensive battle. It was anything but. One thing that really killed Tampa is turnovers. They fumbled the opening kickoff of the game. Kansas City goes right down in 2 plays and scores. And they had a turnover later in the game and led to a 22-yard touchdown drive, I think, for the Chiefs. The amazing stat for me in this game wasn't how many yards Mahomes and Brady threw for, because I don't think anyone's surprised when those guys have great games, was that Kansas City rushed for 189 yards and 37 carries. That's a nice statistic. Kansas City doesn't usually run that much. The big statistic was Tampa ran the ball 6 times for 3 yards. And I thought the Dolphins had trouble running the ball. That is just amazing to me. And Kansas City really stuck it to them. The Tampa defense had only given up 27 points in the first 3 games, and they gave up 41 points last night. So I'll turn it back to you, Scott, so the other guys can chime in with their thoughts on those 3 games and the Tua concussion thing.
Yeah, let's talk about the Tua concussion. Of all the things you mentioned with the Dolphins, I believe the NFLPA fired the doctor. You remember hearing that story, Mark? You're nodding your head, so I'm going to turn to you with some details about the NFLPA firing the doctor.
Well, I'll tell you, looking at that game, first of all, I think the NFL looks at the money more so than the player's health in this situation. He should have never been playing in that game in Cincinnati.
Right.
I know they were trying to, get to 4-0 here, playing the defending AFC champs, but you don't risk the health. I've always said, the season is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Right.
And when you try to win a ball game to get to 4-0, you're not going to ever win a Super Bowl in September, or October. But you can lose a playoff game. But the problem here is, this situation with the quarterbacks that get injured, the protocol, somebody in a higher up must have said, hey, let's get the guy on the field here. We need to win a ball game. And now somebody has to take a fall. Somebody needs to be held accountable. A doctor's fired. The NFL is investigating this. But I think this injury is a little bit more than you can, we all know. I mean, I think there's something being hidden here, and I don't think he's ready to go. And they got a game going up with the Jets on Sunday in New York. And let's face it, the Jets are playing some good football. They've already gone 2-2 against the AFC North, and this is a home game. And I wouldn't risk Tua there. I would just basically start Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know what Avi's thoughts are on this.
Right here, before we do that, I want to go over this doctor thing real quick before I turn it over to Avi. the NFL Players Association has exercised its prerogative to terminate the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant involved in clearing quarterback Tua Tagovailoa to return to the Miami Dolphins Week 3. The union, which opened an investigation of the situation following the contest, made the decision after uncovering several mistakes by the consultant, a source told Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports. Additional factors in the doctor's termination included a failure to understand his role as an unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant and hostility toward the investigation process. Sources told NFL Network's Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport, and that's as far as I'm going to go about it. I just the reason why I mentioned it is when and Mark, you're rolling with it, okay? There's a lot of layers to this, and we don't have all night to discuss one topic because we have a lot to get to. But the reality of the situation is this, okay? We saw that when you talk about player safety, this is not an issue to mess around with. And what complicates this situation is this game was televised on national television for the whole world to see it. So when you combine the national television versus the fact that it was debatable he should have returned against Buffalo, now I understand that the Dolphins have just recently signed Reed Stinnett as a third quarterback just to make sure that they have another quarterback on the roster. So with that said, forget about the loss to Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is getting better, and they're starting to get a feel for each other with their offensive line. It's all about Tua Tagovailoa. I think the Dolphins would be wise, to sit him as long as you possibly can. Mark, you talked about Teddy Bridgewater being in there. Don't sell Skylar Thompson short either. This guy was drafted later in the draft, and I think there could be some reps depending on what the thing you do. I only mention my thoughts on this. Don't rush to a Tagovailoa back premature again. You're talking about a man's future and your franchise quarterback. That's all I have to say on it. We'll talk about it in the coming weeks. Now I'll turn over to Avi.
Well, I definitely agree with what Mark was saying earlier. I truly believe Tua was thrown in way too early. The Dolphins, I felt like their only concern was winning against the Bills and winning against Cincinnati. They weren't thinking about his health. They wanted to throw him in there as quickly as possible. And obviously we saw that was the wrong decision to make. But my real concern lies with what I believe may be an ongoing problem with Tua, and that surrounds his question mark of his durability. Right. Is this going to be an ongoing problem with Tua? Is this going to keep happening? Now, from what I've seen, Tua has been getting injured. He gets injured a lot. This seems to have something to happen a lot. So really what it comes down to, my main concern, like I said, is Tua's durability, and can his body continue to sustain the punishment he's had to endure as a pro quarterback? Can he survive long-term? And if not, the Dolphins need to figure out what they're going to do, because right now the Dolphins team is built to win now. We need a quarterback that is going to lead us to winning ball games and hopefully get to a Super Bowl. And if Tua cannot stay on the field and stay healthy, we're going to have a real problem. So that's where we are now looking into see what we got is in Teddy Bridgewater. Obviously agree. I think Tua needs to stay out as long as possible. But now is the time to see what we have in Teddy Bridgewater and see if Teddy Bridgewater can continue to do and get the success that we were getting out of Tua and actually get us to continue to winning some games. Now, we do have a very easy schedule, I think, personally, coming up. The Dolphins could very easily be 10-1 in just, 6-7 weeks, I believe. I think they'll probably end up 7-3, but we'll see. But the real question is, like what you just said, Scott, is the question mark with Skylar Thompson, who's waiting in the realm, waiting right now behind Teddy Bridgewater. He was the preseason hero, the MVP. We want to see what he can do. But obviously, Teddy Bridgewater is the answer. That's what we got him to do because we knew this was going to happen. Tua was going to get injured, and Teddy Bridgewater would end up coming in. So let's just see what Teddy Bridgewater can do going forward.
Well, the reality is you're not going to get 16, 17 games out of them going forward. You want to talk about the reason to go 10-1? Why don't we just start to listen off the opponents while you brought it up? The Dolphins' upcoming schedule right now, you have Sunday, they're at the Jets. And then the following week, you got the Minnesota Vikings, Pittsburgh Steelers, which, believe it or not, we're going to talk about. on this show in a little while. They're at the Detroit Lions on October 30th. They get the Chicago Bears on the November 6th. And then you have the Browns on Sunday the 13th at home. So then you have a bye week, and then on the 27th of October, you got the Texans. We won't go any further than that. So those are the opponents on 10.
All winnable games.
Yeah, well, they are. So the reality is this. You're not going to get 16, 17 games out of them. Already rolled out one. So durability, without a doubt, is definitely an issue. All right, Greg, take it from there.
Yeah, just to follow up on that thought, regards to Scarlett Thompson, very impressed by him in preseason, but he was playing against second and third stringers for the most part. You also have to keep in mind, even though he's a rookie, he's not your typical rookie. He's 25 years old already. He started, I think, 47 games in college. So he's got a lot of experience. But as Avi said, the Dolphins are built to win now.
Right.
Okay. So unless Bridgewater also gets hurt, I don't think Thompson is going to see the field this season. And I can't imagine, even if they decide Tua is not the future of this team, I can't imagine them turning this team over to Thompson next year.
Until he gets hurt.
Yeah, unless for some reason Thompson has to play 4 or 5 games this year, and he plays very impressive.
Well, the only thing I'll add to that is if he made the 53-man roster, which he did, that means Mike McDaniel thought enough of him to make that comment. That's it. I'm not going any deeper than that. 25-year-old, you summed it up well. So I'm with you all the way, Greg. I really am.
And I don't care how good Tua is or isn't. I've already made up my mind. My biggest concern when they drafted him 3 years ago was he was injured a lot in college. So
Right.
How's that going to get better in pros when the guys are bigger and faster? And he's gotten injured every year he's been with the Dolphins. I don't care how talented he is. He just can't stay on the field, and you can't have that with your number one quarterback. So they need to be looking for whatever plan B is, which is far beyond Teddy Bridgewater. All right?
Yeah, all about availability. Any closing thoughts on the topic, Mark, before we move on?
Well, and Navi brought up some interesting points along with Greg, but the real question here is I don't think Tua can lead them to a Super Bowl, not only with the injury and staying on the field. It's just that he's too small, and that's the problem. You got to be able to see defenses. The same problem is resurfacing in Arizona. I think you got to find the next Jalen Hurts in this league to come into Miami and save the season. That's what I think you're going to have to do, whether it's in your own backyard or you got to go out of your backyard and find somebody to get you to the promised land.
All right, well, let's turn this up to I-95, okay, north. And I know that drive all too well because I go back to Miami and Jacksonville a lot. I make no bones about it. I've done a lot of stuff with the Jaguars in recent years. Greg alluded to the 29-21 loss to the Eagles. 5 Jacksonville turnovers. What do you want to say? I still believe what you're saying, Mark, is the Jaguars will still have a good year. Whether they get in the playoffs, time will tell. But 5 turnovers is not acceptable for Trevor Lawrence. I do believe Doug Peterson will get that figured out. Philadelphia Eagles, I think, are definitely one of the best teams in the league. With that said, Greg Fuchs, I'll turn it over to you to talk about this subject briefly. We have a lot to get to tonight. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I didn't see the Jaguars game, but they should have beat Washington first week, and then they just destroyed Indianapolis and, drawing a blank, the Chargers in week 3, and they're up 14-0 against the Eagles. And I just can't imagine Trevor Lawrence fumbling 4 times in a game again. So if he'd only fumbled maybe twice, they might have won that game. Now I didn't see the game, so I'm not sure if that really would have happened. But the Jags are relatively for real. I mean, they're still young, need to see a larger sample size, but they should take care of Houston this week and go to 3-2.
All right, Avi, give me your thoughts about the Jaguars. You're familiar with them.
Well, I did watch the game, and from what I saw, obviously started off early. Jaguars got a nice, comfortable 14-0 lead, couldn't sustain it. What I saw was a big effect on the game was the weather, the rain. Trevor Lawrence couldn't even hold on to the ball. The wide receivers weren't catching the ball. Trevor Lawrence was holding on to the ball a little bit too long. He wasn't really seeing his wide receivers quick enough, wasn't making decisions quick enough. That's what probably caused the sacks, caused some turnovers, just couldn't really get it going. Also, it seemed like the Jaguars abandoned the run early. They really weren't getting James Robinson involved. They seemed to be getting ETN and Agnew involved in catch pass and pass catches, but they weren't really running the ball. They weren't sticking to it later in the game. And I didn't really like what I saw from the Jaguars. Obviously, lesson learned. I think they can take what they learned from this game and go into Houston and really make a statement that they're for real. And maybe just Philadelphia was just a better team the other day.
Mark?
Well, I think what happened here, it was a homecoming of sorts for Doug Peterson.
Right.
I mean, they had a chance. They took their foot off the gas. When you had this team down 14-0, you don't want to sit there and read your, 15-minute highlight reel. But I will tell you this. I don't look at results as much as I look at progress. And this team is young. They're developed. They got guys signed. They got draft picks there. They're going to be okay. You learn from this. Sometimes you got to, get slapped in the face a couple of times and then realize what's at stake. They'll bounce back this week against Houston. But this was a tough loss. You got to put it in your rearview mirror and just, Trevor Lawrence had a game. He held himself accountable. If you looked at the press conference, he said, he let his team down. And that's what all you can ask. It's accountability and basically communication with character and integrity. And this team's not finger pointing. They know what they need to do. And Doug Peterson's the coach to lead them to that.
Well, how can you finger point, Mark, when you had Urban Meyer last year? Think about it. If that doesn't get any worse to me, then I really don't know what'll get any worse. And yet I believe that Urban Meyer will resurface in the college ranks. His name is being brought up for a lot of openings anyhow. Before I comment further, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com. And follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you cannot find the show on our website, just go to youtube.com, look for South Florida Tribune, and then please hit subscribe. And then you'll get all the notifications of the upcoming shows that we have, as well as other YouTube videos that I churn out on the road as well. We do a lot of stuff on the road, believe it or not. Whenever I'm on the road, I like to build the channel that way, in addition to what we do here on nights like this, having guests and so forth. So, believe it or not, some of the places I've gone to this year have been Hilton Head, South Carolina, Talladega. We're going to be putting some stuff up there, and as well as a lot of the local coverage that we have. So, please subscribe. So with that said, all I got to say about the Jaguars is Doug Peterson's a heck of a coach. They're still trying to figure it out. Remember, this team only won, I believe, a couple of games last year. That's it. So I'm with you, Mark. I personally don't. I think they'll win about 8 or 9 games this year. It's a progress, but anything they can up here, Jacksonville progress, I think will be really good. All right, let's go to the Sunday night game. This was a game that many thought would be played in Minnesota. The Buccaneers trained in Miami due to Hurricane Ian, and they were a little bit inconvenienced by all of that. But in the end, what turned out was we had a pretty good football game Sunday night out in Tampa. Greg alluded to it before. Kansas City won it 41-31. So with that said, Greg, give me your thoughts about the Buccaneers Kansas City Chiefs game.
Like I said, the Bucs only ran the ball 6 times, even though they have one of the better running backs in the league, I think, in Leonard Fournette. But they were down because of those 2 turnovers I mentioned. They were down 21-3 before they knew what hit them.
Abandoned it.
And Kansas City is going to score at least a touchdown or 2 more in that game. All right, with Mahomes there. So I guess Tampa just said we need to throw on every single down, which is pretty much what they did, and they put up 31 points. You score 31 points, you should win the game. But Patrick Mahomes, he had a different idea, and in that game, I mentioned in my article, it was one of the most exciting 2-yard plays I ever saw in my life. I mean, it was first thing. I don't know if it was first and goal, and they're on the 2-yard line, and Mahomes ran around for what seemed like 30 seconds, just escaping the pressure multiple times. And then he starts running down the sideline. He's at the 2-yard line. Looked like he's going to just bowl his way into the end zone. And he just stopped on a dime, flips the ball to Edwards-Helaire in the back of the end zone. Just an amazing 2-yard touchdown play. tough to really do it justice in words. Go watch it on YouTube to see it live or on tape. But just an exciting play, an exciting game, and I enjoyed watching it.
Well, I didn't have a chance to watch. I was on the road, and before I go any further, I want to give a kudos to Candy Ebling, who did a great job getting us back home last night from Talladega. Unfortunately, on the road, I felt ill, and I wasn't able to make the drive through the night. Candy stepped up and did an outstanding job getting us back. She does a lot of good things for us anyways, with the website and uploading the article, stories in the article. So kudos to Candy. She's just unbelievable. With that said, okay, let's talk about the stars shining. I'm only going to mention two of them right now. That Mahomes finished 23 for 37 for 249 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tom Brady, to me, will always be Tom Brady. Went 39 for 52, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns. Two of the greatest quarterbacks that ever played the game. I won't give anybody GOAT, greatest of all time, because then you started getting into that conversation. You're forgetting about some of the greatest quarterbacks ever played the game. I don't like to go GOAT status on just a lot of people. Brady can make a case for it with the amount of Super Bowls, but the game definitely lived up to its billing as a result. So Avi, pick it up from there.
Well, look, like you said, Brady looked great in the red zone. Just, he had no dip in his composure. His velocity looked great. Accuracy was great. He's as good as ever. 7 yards per play last night. Of course, he has the weapons that are really helping him. But the question is, can they stay healthy for him? Can they stay on the field? Can the offensive line step up and continue, or not continue, but actually give Brady some time? Because Brady has not been getting too much time. The offensive line has not been giving him the time. Again, what Greg mentioned earlier, I'm a little worried about the Buccaneers' run game. Yes, clearly they stopped running the ball as they probably lost the lead early. But Leonard Fournette, -3 rushing yards. All 6 of those yards came from Rachaad White. The Bucs have got to do something. The game plan has got to change. I understand Chiefs got out to an early lead quick. And you know what? The Chiefs have 2 things that nobody else has in the NFL. And what is that? Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. They just did their thing, couldn't stop them. Patrick Mahomes is something out of this world. He played out of this world. I don't even understand some of the things that he does. Clyde Edwards-Helaire also really couldn't be stopped, did what he wanted with the football. Chiefs were just all over it. Just you couldn't stop him yesterday. But like I said, on a high note, Tom Brady looked really good. So all the Bucs can do and hope is what they can get their stuff together and surround Tom Brady with a good game plan and a way to win these games. I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are going to the Super Bowl, but I think they can definitely contend. They can definitely get themselves into the playoffs, and they can really try to prove something down the road that these early losses early in the season were just maybe a fluke. Now, I also believe the Bucs have had a tough schedule these last 3-4 games. They have been playing some really tough teams. So let's just see what the Bucs do. I wouldn't get excited thinking that they're done with. I think the Bucs have a lot to prove, and I think they will prove themselves going forward.
Going to the chat room, Coach Dante, what's up? Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow on Coffee and Sports. Wasn't able to make that show today because obviously I was driving back from Alabama, but I go on with Coach Dante 2-3 times a week in the morning when I have a chance. Mark, with that said, again, you're right. You talk about the fact that the one thing you can't do against Kansas City, don't get into a shootout with these guys. Mahomes, even though you lose Tyreek Hill, he'll figure it out. He'll find other people to get involved. You get into a shootout with Kansas City Chiefs, you're in trouble. All right, Mark, take it from there.
Well, first of all, I think Tampa's going to come out of the NFC and represent them in the Super Bowl because when you look at the rest of the teams, I'm not sold on Dallas. I'm not sold on the Rams. I know they're defending Super Bowl champs, and I'm not sold on Green Bay. Tom Brady had a great game yesterday. What they tended to get away from was what they should have had was the blueprint that they used to beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl when they harnessed Kelce and Mahomes there. They got away from that. That's the blueprint that should have came out for this game. But you know what it showed me is later in the game when Fournette got his legs going, but Julio Jones is out, Godwin. I mean, they're banged up. They got a big game in Tampa on Sunday for the division. Atlanta comes here. Atlanta's playing good football of late. I think Atlanta's going to be their chief competition in that division. But I'm not really worried about Tampa. This was more that Kansas City had to show themselves that they can come into Tampa and win in this stadium, more so than Tampa beating Kansas City again. So when it's all said and done, I think Tampa will go farther than Kansas City will.
Good point. And I want to touch back on Avi's point about the Buccaneers schedule. First of all, the Buccaneers were at the Cowboys in week 1, and as a result, they ended up beating the Cowboys, I believe, 19-3. So week 2, they went to the Saints and ended up winning 20-10, 2 road games. They lost to the Packers 14-12. Aaron Rodgers trying to figure it out there as well. And of course, yesterday's game lost to the Chiefs 41-31. Trying to find that offense will be the key. If I understand correctly, I think Julio Jones did play yesterday.
He was out there.
Yeah, he was out there, but he's trying to get himself into this. You know, when I look at Julio Jones, I look at like when Antonio Brown came in New England. It's going to take him a while to get accustomed to Tom Brady, and then they'll click. It's not going to happen in the first 4 games, but they're kind of banged up there. Their defense has been giving up some yards, and Tom Brady, I believe, is 124-5 when they score 31 points or more.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the Buccaneers right now. Mike Evans is back in the lineup, 8 receptions for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was a factor.
Had a good game.
Chris Godwin did get in 7 for 59 yards. Leonard Fournette, 7 receptions. I'm talking about receiving-wise, by the way, and a touchdown. So, and yeah, Julio Jones, Mark, it'll take a little while to get sync without it. And Cameron Brate, 4 for 32. So they spread it out a little bit. Again, you scored 31 points, you spread it out. All right, I'm going to do something I normally don't do tonight. We're going outside the state of Florida, and the reason why I'm doing that is Madman Mancini's from the Pittsburgh area, but I think it's a pertinent topic that I'd really prefer to talk about with somebody, especially when they're from a given area. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark in just a moment. Kenny Pickett, new starting quarterback, is inevitable. Mark, what are your thoughts about Kenny Pickett taking over the reins of the Steelers?
Well, we all know that when a rookie comes into the league, he's holding the clipboard for a year. We saw that with John Elway, with Steve DeBerg. We saw that with Peyton Manning. I would have liked to see Pickett hold it a little longer. I mean, Trubinsky got they didn't do nothing against the Jets. They've been struggling. They're 1-3. I think Tomlin was facing a firing squad there in Pittsburgh, being asked all these questions week in and week out, what's going on with the Pittsburgh offense. But I will tell you this, the first time a rookie has scored 2 rushing touchdowns there, and that was brilliant in itself. But, some tip balls there weren't his fault. The receivers tipped it, caused some interceptions there. It's going to be interesting. The Steelers, got a stretch here where they get the Bills. They're going to get a long stretch of some prominent teams. After the Bills, the Buccaneers go into Pittsburgh. So could be a long year for the Steelers, but I don't think you have to hit the panic button. They've been around this game for so long. They don't replace coaches in Pittsburgh, but surprised they didn't give Mitch Trubinsky a little more time. It can want a person's confidence when you pull somebody like this early in the season. We'll see how it goes, but I think they're going to go with Pink and let him get his growing pains.
You know what, Mark? That's an excellent point. I do believe that quarterbacks should hold a clipboard for about a year. I really, really do. And there's pressure mounting up in Pittsburgh to make this move. I don't believe that you should come to fans as well as the media, but in this particular case, I think his hand is being forced. And you're going to see Kenny Pickett go through the growing pains. You know what, Mark? We brought up, and Greg probably as well, are in an area where you really like to go out there and see these quarterbacks spend a year on the sidelines. We've seen it so many times. Alex Smith held down the fort for Patrick Mahomes. Steve DeBerg held down the fort for a lot of teams, so it didn't really matter. And the list goes on and on. So I agree with you 100%, Mark, that I think Trubisky should have held it down, but let's face reality. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, and not only that, Drew Bledsoe held it down for Tom Brady, and the only reason Tom Brady got in there, AFC Championship game when the Steelers knocked out Bledsoe.
Right. No, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So good points, Mark, all the way around. I wanted to bring this subject up because you were on the show and give you your opportunity to chime in, and I'm glad you did exactly that. Greg, some thoughts before we go back to other Florida things about Kenny Pickett?
I'm a big Kenny Pickett fan. I saw him play several times in college. He just always looked to control. He made plays with his arm, made plays with his legs. And to me, he just seemed like a future NFL starter. Now, is he going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL? I don't know. I think he'll be a top 15 quarterback. Maybe not this year. The only thing to remind, and when we talk about rookies holding the clipboard, I get it. But everyone's different. Like 49ers drafted Trey Lance last year. I think he started only like 12 games in college. Whereas Kenny Pickett, I think, started like 37 or something games in college. A lot of experience there. And I remember saying in some of our podcasts earlier in the year when we were talking quarterback carousel, we were talking the draft, to me, with Trubisky there, as long as Pickett showed something in preseason, he would have been my opening day starter. He's just a better quarterback, a better athlete than Trubisky is.
Fair enough. All right, Javi.
So like you mentioned, everybody's different. You could go on the list all over and over as long as it could be. But you know what? Truly, you never know. Maybe some of the guys that held the clipboard, maybe they would have been successful early. But what I'm going to say this. Check this out. Pittsburgh finally gets their local boy, right? They were supposed to pick Dan Marino back in 1983. They passed on him. It was just all theirs for the taking. But I believe it was Terry Bradshaw's final year. Final year. Or second to final year, something like that. And Pittsburgh didn't really want to make that decision on going quarterback at that situation. So Pittsburgh finally gets to pick their local boy. So it should be exciting to see what he's got. I also thought Kenny Pickett probably had what it took to be the opening day starter. But I think Pittsburgh didn't want to make that choice decision real quick. They still had somebody decent in what they had. And obviously off of what happened with Dwayne Haskins, they kind of wanted to probably stick with the veteran quarterback that they knew could do it and not rush the guy in there. Obviously, very sad what happened with Haskins. We were all wondering what maybe he was the guy, but they got him. Kenny Pickett, here they are. Let's see what happens. Pittsburgh definitely needs to get a new identity on offense. So they really need to see what they got there now. Why not?
Okay, go ahead, man.
Well, and not only that, we saw in Miami when David Woodley was there, and here came Dan Marino. So, Dan Marino had to take his clipboard and hold it for a little bit, and then when Woodley stepped aside. But we've seen this all the way around. Don Strock's down there and everything. I just think now with more money being passed on to these younger quarterbacks, they don't want to sit around and wait a year for them to get ready. They're throwing them in the fire well right off the bat, and you see them struggle. You see the struggles with Justin Fields in Chicago. You see it with Trey Lance in San Francisco. And you saw it with Zach Wilson in New York. I think the quarterbacks that sit and wait and bide their time, like the Lamar Jacksons that learn under a Flacco, they get that much better because they're picking up what they're seeing the field from afar on the sidelines.
No question about it. But I will tell you this, though, Mark. You're talking about money being passed around to these quarterbacks. Okay, let me go ahead and add a little bit more to this situation. It isn't as much as it used to be. How much guaranteed money did Matthew Stafford get at the beginning about Sam Bradford? There's a lot more money being thrown around in the past than there is now. The only reason, so I get it. I do believe in the clipboard thing all the way. You made another example with Lamar Jackson sitting behind Flacco. So you are on target there. But there was a whole lot more money in the past before they had the rookie wage scale, but there's just a lot more impatience as well. All right, 2 more college things I want to talk about real quick before we call it a night. Miami Hurricanes have had a little time to think about what happened to them against Middle Tennessee State. I'm not getting into that. I had to watch it. I would have rather watched The Exorcist or Friday the 13th, and I didn't watch either of them anyways. And if I did, arachnophobia, but it was ugly. With that said, okay, Greg Fuchs, why don't you give us some thoughts about the Miami Hurricanes and their game against the North Carolina Tar Heels?
Yeah.
Canes need to get back on track, and they need to do it quickly.
Yeah.
I did read this today, though, that Tyler Van Dyke will be the starting quarterback, that there will be no quarterback controversy with Jake Garcia. So with that said, pick it up from there, Greg.
Yeah, so the good news was the Canes didn't lose this weekend. Bad news is they didn't play this weekend. And to be honest, I have no idea what to expect from them against North Carolina. You would think after 2 weeks and after that horrific loss against Middle Tennessee State that they would come out on fire and be physical.
Yeah.
But I just don't know. They have problems on the offensive line, which it has been a huge problem at Miami for years now. I sort of agree with letting Van Dyke come back and start. He just played too well last year. He was a top recruit. You can't just yank him because he's had a couple of bad games. But if he has a bad first half, he's not starting the second half. Not really sure about how good North Carolina is. They're 4-1, but they haven't played anybody. Their one loss was to Notre Dame, and their wins were over Florida A&M, Appalachian State, Georgia State, and a Virginia Tech team, which I don't think is that good. So I'll be very curious to see how the Canes look this Saturday at Hard Rock Stadium.
Avi, some quick thoughts on this one?
Well, I'll tell you what. This is an absolute must win for Mario Cristobal. He has to win this game. Needs this win more than anything. I don't care if it's by 1 point or 100 points. They need to get this now. After losing those embarrassing losses to Texas A&M and Middle Tennessee, this is it. The Canes just can't afford to do it anymore. If they want to get any kind of momentum, any kind of confidence out of their players, they're going to need to win this ball game. If they don't win it, I really don't know what to say about the Canes going forward.
Fair enough. All right, Mark, some quick thoughts about this one?
Well, you know how I look at Mario Cristobal. He had a great situation. He could have been in obscurity in Oregon. He decided to come to Miami. When you get in these hostile environments where they have a tradition of winning, like Notre Dame, like Texas, like LSU, and if you don't produce, they'll give you a pass for a little bit. But then the lynching squad comes out, man, and they get you out of town real quick. That leash is getting shorter each week. I don't know. And like Avi just said, this is a must win, whether it's by a point or 100. He's going to win this game this week. He don't want to face a firing squad asking negative questions to him each and every week. So I don't know.
Yeah, I go to
as good as mine.
I go to those post-game availabilities, and Cristobal takes his time before he has to face us. So I'll be curious to see which Miami Hurricanes team shows up. I know Bethune-Cookman and Southern Mississippi are the worst examples of what to see if you're looking to evaluate your team. Losing to Texas A&M, they self-destructed there. And I'm sick and tired of hearing about the Middle Tennessee State game, so I'm not saying any more about it. I'll protect my voice because I'm going to need it the rest of the week, but I will not talk about Middle Tennessee State. But I will tell you one thing. You know, the Canes are smart. They give Cristobal enough cooling off time so he knows what we're going to ask and gets addressed to that early. Well, go ahead, Mark.
Well, they pay coaches big money. We've seen it out here with USC, with Lincoln Riley, and they paid Cristobal big money to come down there and resurrect that program. So, you know, this falls on, you know, the coach, whether they're playing Bowling Green, Middle Tennessee State, or Florida State. He has to have these guys prepared. And I've seen 2 games where back-to-back, they haven't been prepared to play football.
Well, I'll say this before we move on to FSU Wake Forest. If there's a guy capable of turning the Miami Hurricanes program around, I do believe strongly in Mario Cristobal, and I'll leave it there. Okay. Last college game I want to talk about, Greg, and you can go over a few basics on this one. Florida State University against Wake Forest. What did you get out of this thing?
Yeah, just one quick story first. I went to a meeting the other day, and I had a University of Miami shirt on. Only like 10 people there. And the person sitting across the table from me goes, "Nice game on Saturday. Oh, by the way, I graduated from Middle Tennessee State." What are the odds of that?
Yeah, well, obviously the odds of it were good enough because you mentioned it tonight and it happened. All right, on to FSU.
FSU started off 4-0, including a win over Utah. They lost their first game. Shouldn't be ashamed about it. Wake Forest has a pretty good team. The game was close most of the time. And like a lot of football games, it all comes down to who makes the most mistakes. There's only one turnover in the game, led to a Wake Forest touchdown. And Florida State committed 11 penalties for 96 yards. You're not going to win many games when you do that kind of stuff, especially against a very good Wake Forest team.
Yeah, I like the way that the coaching situation is going up there. Is it Mike Norvell?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's doing a good job up there. I think the Seminoles will get it right with that hire. Sometimes you don't get instant results right away. I understand it. I totally do. But I believe that FSU got that coaching situation right. Obviously, some quick thoughts.
Yeah, tough loss to Wake Forest after such a strong start to the season. FSU giving up 3 drives of 75 yards plus that led to a TD means the defense was just getting tired. It was on the field for too long. Like like Greg, I'm sorry, had mentioned earlier, they have to cut back on penalties. 96 yards they gave up on 11 penalties. Yeah, they can't do that if they want to win the ball games. Way too many mistakes. Like they said, they started off strong, but then after that, it kind of went downhill. FSU just didn't have any playmakers to step up against Wake Forest. So if you're going to need playmakers to step up against a team like that, so we'll see. FSU just really couldn't get it done. Close game, but they couldn't finish it.
Mark?
Well, I think in college football, my always slogan has been good teams win at home, great teams win on the road. And you're seeing that in college football with some of these top echelon teams winning on the road. So that's the key, is going in these hostile environments and being able to win.
Okie doke. Well, good show tonight with you guys. Enjoyed it. Everybody had something to bring to the table. Good stuff. I'll be at the Marlins game tomorrow against the Atlanta Braves. Looking to get down there one more time. Automatically, as everybody knows, I'll not be returning as a Marlins skipper. We'll be curious to see in the coming weeks who they're going to bring in. We won't talk about that tonight. But anyway, I do want to go out there and send a special shout out to Russell Branham, who obviously is in charge of the Talladega track, Miami Homestead, which I'll be doing some stuff with him. He also handles Daytona for hosting us over the weekend. Chase Elliott emerges the race winner. I'm wearing a Hendrick Motorsports cap tonight because in Victory Lane, they were throwing hats out there, deflected, and my left hand got my hand on it, and I grabbed it, and that was it. And I actually have a picture with Jeff Gordon wearing that hat as well. I'll put it on social media at some point. It was neat. But the NASCAR experience was fantastic, and Russell Branham, I thank you very much for doing it. It was really good stuff. And also appreciate the participation in the chat room as well. George Eichhorn popped in, Coach Dante, guy by the name of Pedro Mayo, talks about the Jacksonville Jaguars 62-7 win over the Miami Dolphins another lifetime ago. But to get to somebody, at least he's paying attention to what we are doing. So one more time, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So like I said earlier, if you have a hard time finding it for our website, then go out there and go to youtube.com, look for South Florida Tribune, hit the subscribe button. You'll have all the notifications of all the shows. Not only what we do here, but all the videos I post on the road, a lot of places I go, and there's a lot of different places to go. So, and if you want to contact us via email, do so at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. We'll be more than happy to get to you. All right, I'm going around the horn, Mark. Let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Well, first of all, prayers and thoughts to all you guys down there in Florida, whether you're in the eye of that storm that came through there or not. It's just been ravaged. So you guys have been on my mind for the whole week, and just want to send those prayers out to you. XM 203, Sirius 217, Philadelphia's WWDB AM 860 on Thursdays, Sal and Mary Ann. And this week I'll be finishing up 2 years with the Pittsburgh Pirates and Tarek Brock. Just so blessed. Always a blessing to do this show on Mondays with you three guys. Man, I love this.
It's a lot of fun. We enjoy your insights, Mark. We enjoy your insights. You're the consummate pro. And I also enjoy working with you and Bruce Kessinger on Saturday as well. I know about the Dorney show, but you always do a great job making that show interesting week in and week out. I truly enjoy being a part of it. Thank you for having me on Saturday with you and Bruce. All right, Greg.
Yeah, one thing first. Scott, we've been talking for almost 50 minutes, and I'm amazed that you have not brought up one of the biggest stories in the NFL this past weekend. Took place in Green Bay, the NFL debut of Bailey Zappi.
Oh, yeah.
10 for 15,
I was waiting.
99 yards and a touchdown.
Well, you know what, Greg? I didn't bring it up because I knew you would. How do you like that? You know what, Greg?
I think Zappi is Scott's illegitimate child because he just absolutely loves him.
Well, you know what, Greg? I had thought about it, but knowing that I've worked with you for so long and you know me real well, that's the best part about working with people that you like to work with. They know you. I waited for you to bring it up. Yeah, you know what? Bailey Zappi could be the future of the New England Patriots. If they doesn't become their future starting quarterback, they get a good return if somebody really
needs. He may start again this week.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. All right, Avi, put it out there.
Well, real quick, like Mark had mentioned, I appreciate the thoughts. It was pretty rough for us this weekend down here in Florida. Unfortunately, I didn't make the Cincinnati game, the Dolphins game. I got my flight canceled, so I wasn't able to make the flight. Big bummer. It's all right. It happens. It wasn't that great of a game, all that happened, so it would have been kind of sad as well. Plus, my Cincinnati fans, Bengal family, friends would have rubbed it in my face, so we'll just leave it at that. Anyways, you can find me, Avi Greenwald, on Facebook and Greenwald Avi on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook pretty much. Anytime you want to see me, just reach out and you will find me there.
Well, I hope they gave you a voucher for the ticket so you can apply it someplace else. Don't they usually do that anyways in the event of a problem like that? I'm sure you'll make it somewhere else. Now, we enjoyed having you guys on tonight. You guys are great. And I'm glad that we were able to get back safely from Alabama. We were hosted real well, enjoyed it. And once again, Candy Evelyn did an outstanding job when I got ill last night. But we still got a lot accomplished, though, over the course of today. They started that week with Mark and Keith Thorney. And, of course, you know what? I ended up doing another show, and we accomplished a lot up there. So I'm really delighted with the experience. And the best part about it is I'm looking forward to going back up there in April again, and I'll have more time to be able to do more things out in Talladega. You know, when you're piling a lot into a short time, you prioritize what's important. So meanwhile, great job by you guys right here on Fire Up Florida. Look forward to doing it next Monday night. So on behalf of Greg Fuchs, Avi Greenwald, and Madman Mancini, we want to thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Florida. We will catch you next time. Be safe, everybody. God bless, and we'll catch you next time. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.